How do you situate yourself in your own timeline? How do you look back? And I think you're taking a little bit more time between features. So,
Well,
and plus you have family. We're very
yes.
much aware of that. So,
Yes.
is it a moment of reflection for you? Is it?
Actually, I have to say it's always been a moment of reflection. Since my first film, I've always liked to watch films. I've always read. I've always kept on traveling, building. I like to build stuff. I've done it all the time. I live in the countryside since 13 years. There's a lot of work there too. We have post-production studios there in Mexico, so a lot of people come and see us, and they work there. Lisandro, that I just saw in the Paul Schrader Circle, Big Chatman has been there, many friends. I'm always thinking and trying to develop ideas on what cinema is. I don't think cinema is made with a book of instructions like they teach us, but it's rather like writing or painting that are never ending. They can develop forever. And I don't think very much about myself as a filmmaker, the place I have or whatever I take or I want to have. I just want to make films, and they will always reflect my ideas, my visions, whatever there may be. But yes, in the end, probably that's why traditional cultures like the Chinese or the American Indians have always respected the elderly. I now understand, although I've only been in this business for 20 years, but I understand, I can see how it can all accumulate in the end. And for the first time ever, I start feeling that maybe after these 20 years making films, I start having a little, not knowledge because that's too much, but having some ideas that are stronger, that are worthwhile. I'm starting to feeling it now, little by little. So probably if I'm ever 100 and I keep on making films, there will be some good ideas there, probably.
You're going from room to room to an outside space. There's a strong sense of isolation, but there's also that negotiation. I want you to hear me, but I also need to hear myself. And so I'm thinking a lot on a technical aspect. How did that sequence come about?
Yeah. And then there's a very strange moment when there's no one in the camera, and you just see like the angle of a door and of a wall, and she comes in, and the doors open and close, and then they go out, and the wind, and I just think, I'm thinking about this for the first time ever, because when I write a screenplay, I never ask myself why, what for. I just let the intuition come forward, and I suppose when I'm writing, I just feel the need to walk out. I imagine the windows. I need air. Probably that's why I wrote it that way. I didn't ask myself any of those questions when I was writing. But now that you're asking, I could probably say that because I'm not into writing literature that will be filmed, as most big films are. I don't care about the argument. About the argument alone, like the lines as in literature, and then putting it in a car, as you say, or in a couch. That would be the easiest, just to get to the argument. But for me, because cinema is not literature, but it's about presence, about being in a place, about things existing below light and among air and among sound, then all this becomes one single thing, and it transcends the argument itself, and it becomes life. And life actually occurs in these spaces, and with all these windows and all this movement. There's even the woman that works with them at the house at a certain point hears them and walks off with the room. Did you notice that?
Yes, okay. Of course.
So there's all these things also that have to do with privacy, or not, and how they break it when they lose their temper, and how they make it embarrassing for themselves and for others, and how they're going down, they're falling because of the arguments. It's not just the argument itself that matters, but it's the way it occurs. So the way this argument takes place is as important as the words of the argument itself. So it all forms one single entity that transcends the actual argument. The conduct within the argument is very important.
Yeah, it's unwritten rules in a way.
Yes, unwritten rules, but it all happens very naturally when you're writing. You're connected to the idea of presence and not illustrating literature, which is what so often happens.
The character of Juan, spoiler alert, which is you, has dual functions in many facets of his life. On a professional level, he works the land, but he's also deep in thought. He writes, and I thought it was a really curious choice that we're not privy to. We get a sense of not academia, but we get a sense of what he contributes to a larger landscape. In your thinking of this person, is that something that you decided to sort of purposely not display?
Yeah, I think so. Usually, when you have, in the end, a hero in film, and this hero writes, for example, or paints, you are meant to make something special out of that. So at a certain point, you have to show how he can be illuminated or have an epiphany while he writes, and you know, the typical idea of the music player with the piano. At a certain point, he feels some energy in his fingers, and the music comes forward, and he's a special person. But I've always thought that it's much more interesting to think about people that do certain things like writing poetry or whatever as not specifically special people, at least in everyday life. Probably they're only special when they're writing, or probably they're not even special. I mean, well, they are. Everyone is when he's doing his own thing and he's really focused into it. But I just thought that it would be absurd to make something very special out of him like that. You know, he's a poet. It's enough to say it. He lives in the countryside. He lives like everybody else. He has his children. He takes them to school. He works with the animals and with the land, and has to direct the people that work with him in everyday life. And then for sure he writes some good poetry, I imagine. But what would you see about it? You know, if you are a real good poet now, I wouldn't know. I would be talking with you about going to have a coffee, and you would order in the Starbucks, and you would pay very ordinarily, you know. But we tend to mythify or mystify, you know, make mythology out of filmmakers and this kind of thing, you know. And usually, I mean, it's very important to always remember they're pretty normal individuals, you know. And because this is terrible also when we're young, to make such weighty people out of these artists, because then we think we are never at the same altitude, you know, power, whatever. And I just think we should think of it the other way around. We all, I mean, this is like a cliche, like a self-help book, like we all have a power in us, but it's actually true. I mean, almost everyone's pretty ordinary. Like big artists are pretty ordinary people, and that is very important to remember. So I didn't want to, you know, it would be a cliche in the end, Hollywood as cliche to show him writing. What for? Some people have really been angry about that. Like, what, you never show him writing? Yeah. So what, do you want me to show him writing? Like, really, you need to see him writing to believe me he's a poet, or typing and then reciting his poems? And also, he breeds cattle for bullfighting. You know? People would always think like people that do this are savages and don't have a heart and are cruel. And it's again a cliche, you know. Some people that talk all day New Age love stuff are very neurotic and sometimes very angry.
And they're profit-driven, and they have a whole other mechanisms and reasons for being.
Exactly. So I just didn't want that cliche, you know.
So Diego Garcia, your DP, is Neon Bull... So I'm trying to get a sense of when you started filming, when he shot Neon Bull. Did he do yours before Neon Bull and then came back to yours?
What's the
timeline for that?
It's not even that. He was in film school with my wife, and they were very good friends.
Okay.
So I know Diego way before he shot Neon Bull, and my wife always talked to me about him. And we did the only advertisement I've ever done in my life about 5 years ago. I did it with Diego.
Oh, okay.
So then he went and did Neon Bull. And then he came back to Mexico, and then I suggested Apichatpong he could work with him. And then he did Apichatpong's film, Cemetery of Splendor.
Yeah.
And then he did my film, and now he's doing a lot of stuff.
The role of narration, but also the people that do the narrating. And I was wondering, How did that come about?
You know, when filmmakers say they don't know, people think they're either lying or they're idiots. But I can assure you that, well, I'm not lying, and I hope I'm not an idiot. But I really don't know. I mean, the truth is that when I'm writing, we talk little, you know, like people like journalists or in film theory, we talk little about the directors that write themselves. But there's an equation there that needs to be further discussed. So when I write, because it's very different than adapting a book, and even the best filmmakers have adapted mostly, you know, people like Kubrick or Tarkovsky, Dreyer. But in that sense, I would be more like on the school of people like Bergman, you know, that write and think about everything themselves from scratch. So there you have to believe me that when I'm writing, I really don't know, man.
I believe you. I
don't
trust
know.
you. I believe you.
I just don't know. I just remember my childhood. I remember my youth, my feelings, and things come out not as devices, like I was designing an airplane where every screw and bolt has a place and serves a purpose, but rather it's all flowing like if you would see my memories when I'm dreaming. So I don't know who's the narrator. I don't know what is being. I mean, of course, I understand what is being narrated, but not as a device. I just think of me when I was a youngster, for example, or a boy, because there I'm thinking both ways. And then this thing about the women, for example, this struggle between female and male that starts since you're a little boy. Usually, like they can hang around together, but usually they do hang around separately when they're fighting and they're playing games. That just comes from memory rather than from me wanting to talk about that. But then when you invoke your memories, these themes come, they surge, they come up naturally because they belong to actual reality, to what happened in my life, in our lives, for sure, more than mine. So it just comes as a byproduct. So everything that is happening there is a byproduct of my memories. But of course I'm talking about the way I have felt about playing with others, enjoying life, arguing, fighting, and then being jealous, and then having the other friend that probably is in love with the girl you like. But you know she would probably have liked you if you had been there before, but it happens that he was before you, so you lost her, and it's all a matter of chance. And then you ask questions why, I mean in life, not in film, like why did this happen, what does this mean, etc. So I was just trying to invoke life through memory. And from there on we get to the world of adults, which it's a conceptual world, and where things are more clear and more corrupt and more confused as well. More clear in the sense that it's all, I mean, we think about what we do. The younger we are, the less we think, we just live.
We also rationalize and intellectualize, and yeah.
When I say things become more clear and more complicated, I mean we should rationalize. We put them in paper, but that makes it much more complicated at the same time. We try to clarify, but we only obscure.
Yeah, to help make sense of this crazy world.
So it had to finish with a kiss, you know, a long kiss that makes like the passage to what will come now. After, usually that time we start kissing each other is when we're starting to become adults, and contradictions will come forward, and we will rationalize and just make life more complicated and more rich in a way.
I have to say about the mini screens. I mean, I'm using one right now, but the mini screens that sort of like have taken over our lives, but have also allowed us to have moments of reprieve and moments of clarity, almost like mirrors in a way.
Yes, like some sort of, what is Pepe Grillo, you know, the little, was it in Peter Pan, the consciousness?
Yeah.
What is it, that little insect, remember, that talked to the guy? I know his name in Spanish, but you know, that little consciousness that talks back to you as a mirror.
And I haven't related to those thoughts or ideas in film before, and I thought that was an interesting thing. I don't know if I read too much into it, but
we're just starting there. As you say, it's some sort of mirror that has created some new form of consciousness, because in traditional mirror, you just see yourself. But with this new mirror, you talk to yourself, you hear yourself when you're writing, you hear your words, and when the other words come back, you hear the other words, and it's like a sort of distilled reality that sublimates feeling, and at the same time they're virtual, so at the same time they're somehow corrupt feelings. But it's a really weird thing, you know. I don't know exactly. I think we're very early in that stage, but in a few years we'll see a lot of the effects of this new way of consciousness through our messages and telephones, because it's like living reality, and naming what we go through changes reality. That's only how we subjectivize what we have lived. And in this film, there's pretty much that. There's the facts, and then when you hear the voiceovers and that kind of thing, people told me like, "Oh, you're saying the same things we've already seen," and it's not at all the case. We're hearing what he thinks is happening, which is subjective reality, subjective experience rather than reality. And this subjectiveness now goes a little further with the screens, and it will very much show in our life. I don't know if you already noticed that many people, when you read their WhatsApps and messages or even emails, very often people are very kind and very loving, and they regret having been angry, or they can be more loving. And in actual life, physical life, people sometimes become more much colder, things like this. So this is creating like, it's like some people can be very nice in written
It's
language,
taking out
and they
nuance
cannot be
mainly.
it's taking out some exactly nuance and fear. The fear of actual direct contact is diluted through screens. And that has a good side to it, but at the same time it can have a terrible side, which is that it's making even harder direct contact. So direct contact is becoming more complicated. So it's like probably in the end, I mean, in a long time, we'll really communicate through screens only and through an electronical intermediate, you know. And I don't know if we'll be able to tolerate physical presence anymore. I don't know. We'll never know. But we could make a film of this, you know. Like people wouldn't be able to look at each other and share space together, and we'll just live through virtual means. I don't know exactly, but there's some of that in the film already. I mean, you can see that while writing messages, no matter if it's the phone or the internet, whatever, people manage to be much deeper than in actual direct contact. There, for example, at the concert, I don't know if you noticed that she is, whatever she's texting, she hears with her own words, but whatever she's reading, she hears with her own voice too, but she says it. Yeah. Like she reads it out. Yeah. And people would say, no, you have to hear his voice. And I said, no way, it's much deeper to hear your own voice, his voice through your own voice. And that's probably where all this thing comes, that it's a mirror. Even the other voice becomes your voice because you're reading it, you're making it your own. And there's an interesting process. They're more for psychologists and philosophers to describe than us, probably. But also says something about the magnetic pull that this person has in her life, and why she starts questioning things. Of course. Carlos, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. You're welcome.